All right, episode 2.
August 7th, 2023. It's a Monday. Ken and I are jumping on to dive into our second opportunity to talk with everybody and hopefully hone our podcast recording skills. We were just catching up a little bit before the show and kind of going over how we want to handle these episodes going forward. And I think kind of how we're going to structure it, like we were chatting with, was, the front end of the episode, playing catch up with kind of what's happened in the last week since we talked to each other. Then we're going to do some Q&A. For those of you that don't know, on our Instagram pages over the last few days, we put up some Q&A stuff in our stories for anybody that might have questions about us or our processes or our mindsets or how we, what we think about with regard to manufacturing. So we decided we're going to take a bit of time in the middle of the podcast to kind of go over some of those questions and chat about them. And then we were going to close the episodes with just a look at what we have in the week ahead. Just kind of a simple structure that keeps us on task, me specifically, because I have a tendency to babble. But I think that's what we're going to be doing going forward.
Yeah, it would be cool. We get listening to the other episode mainly just to test all the audio and see how the video was good. I listened to it a little bit in the car and on my headphones, on the speakers and stuff. And we did, at least I know I was trying to continue the conversation quite a bit because it's exciting. So it'd be good kind of accountability for both of us, and realized too, listening to it, that my audio gain was way too high and Google Chrome kept bumping it up, so that was a little bit of feedback, but it's all fixed now. So I think this should be a lot better. But again, growing pains and kind of, new to all this stuff. Yeah. So even though we've both been on podcasts before as guests, so
we're noobs on the production side. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But also, feedback from listeners. If you experience anything that you're like, hey, this was off, or I struggled with this, please let us know, because I got to be honest with you. I have like zero intention of listening back to these because I don't like listening to myself talk. And so I would not pick up on the nuances like a listener might. So please, obviously feel free to shoot us a message and let us know if you experience any technical difficulties with the podcast stuff on your end.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's podcasts, some of my favorite podcasts, I don't really listen to them because the audio is very hard to hear or whatever. So
it's amazing how disconcerting that is when you're trying to listen to something.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's see. It's Monday. We talked the middle, like last Tuesday or Wednesday. I think we were a little bit behind. But how was the weekend? What'd you get into? Anything in the shop, or was it just family stuff?
I was on Saturday was family stuff for the most part. My wife, she's going back to work now at a salon. So Fridays and Saturdays. So Saturday, I took the boys. I met up with my buddy Donnie, and we went to a local park. They got a big splash pad, but got there. Splash pad was closed, but the city ended up getting 2 huge inflatable water slides, massive water slides. So Hudson just played in those for a while with my buddy's kids, and then Grayson was crawling around a bunch. So it was cool. Yeah, we did that on Saturday, and then I got out in the shop a little bit Saturday night, and then yesterday I was out here all day, finished up all those slides, got most of the stuff done that I had that I wanted to do. I had a whole pile of slides that I mentioned last week, and then I ended up getting a bunch more, so I just kept going on those things. So
nice. Today, when you get running, it's tough to break continuity. You might as well run everything.
Yeah. Beginning of the week too. I had that big job last week. It was last week. Whatever. And I ended up having to pull out most of my tools that I use for slides, and it pretty much cross over to all the knife stuff. They're all very similar. I had to pull all that stuff out to make room, because all of the tools that I had, were like that big reamer right there is, monstrous reamer and a bunch of long tools is going 5 inches through some stuff. So I pulled all that out, but putting it all back in, I didn't want to put it back in the same kind of random order in the umbrella that I had it in before, because I was just basically building tools as I needed them when I first got this. And then things kind of stayed right there, but there was no order to it. So I redid all of my tool list in Fusion. I redid all of the order in the machine. So now everything is just kind of sequential. It's, it's probe, face mill, and then a chamfer tool, and then it goes biggest to smallest in all the tools.
Is your probe tool 1?
20 on here.
Okay.
I mean, you could make it whatever you want, but both of your machines are umbrella tool changers, right?
No, this one, the Super Mini Mill side mount.
It is, huh? Yeah.
I wish they were both side mount. I love having, obviously there's a litany of reasons you want to have side mount, but Yeah, I loved it. I love having it over here, and the umbrella is just annoys me. I mean, I can't do anything about it, but I absolutely can't stand umbrella tool changers.
Yeah, not only do you get chips easily stuck on the tapers, which is always a Z issue, but the problem on Haas specifically is side mount tool changers. You can renumber any tool number to whatever you want. You have 200 offsets on there. You can make tool set or pocket 7 tool 200 if you want, or whatever. But on the umbrella tool changers, Haas doesn't allow you to renumber the pockets. So you can't have a tool library of 200 tools or whatever it is.
You can only use 20.
Yeah. You have all the offsets in there.
Super counterintuitive.
It's retarded. So yeah, it has all the pages and everything where you can do it, but it just doesn't take. So it's very frustrating. I know that's a big issue with the umbrella tool changers, and
100%.
Master tool library. It's like every time you're putting anything on an umbrella, you got to renumber it. So there's ways to get around
five tool ones. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, that's like the one time you need a tool tag with an offset number, just so that you're, but I mean, like you said, you have a macro for touching all your tools off, so you can go through it pretty quickly without issue. It's
super fast. Yeah, I just wrote a little alias program for it, and it just calls up the Renishaw G65 program, and then instead of calling up a tool number, it just calls T3026, which is the system variable for current tool in the spindle. So it just basically touches off the current tool that's in the spindle and puts that value to the current tool's length offset.
Nice.
And then there's an M0, and then at the end it calls up an M6. It's a M6 in that one. So it's M6 T3026 plus 1. So it just automatically changes to the next tool in the carousel. So you just can cycle start all the way through it, load it up, cycle start, load it up. So it makes it really fast if you're doing sequential stuff in there, or if I just change a tool out, like if a 16th breaks, whatever, which is the most common tool that I swap, I'll take that out. I'll retorque, put a new one in, clean it, torque it, and then throw it in, and then just MDI M506, and that runs through that alias program. So, or to that sub program.
Nice.
So it's cool.
Oh, because you have op stops between them, right? So that like you can just run current tool. It won't keep cycling, right? It'll stop itself after each tool and give you the option to cycle start again.
Yeah, there's a hard stop. There's an M0 in there, so it'll stop no matter what. So
nice.
It makes it
I'm huge on. You can kind of see behind me. I have a master tool list on the side of both machines, and like that's a really important part of my process and interchangeability continuity. Tool 1 through tool 19 in both machines is the exact same. So that I can more or less throw, obviously I have to tweak, off, my wear offsets if I need to, depending on what I'm cutting. But that way everything's interchangeable program wise. And then if I have some oddball stuff like, a part that needs a different tool and I don't want to interrupt it over here because I have like 5 extra tool numbers, I can throw, those parts over here and without having to interrupt anything else. And that's what that little board behind me is right there. Is tool 20 through 24, just whatever is actually in there, just so I can quickly glance around. Those are like small efficiencies, right? Like just things that that make my process. Everybody has a little nuanced stuff.
Yeah, that stuff definitely helps. I'm building all my stuff in Google Sheets with all that EDP numbers, and I don't really mess too much with like tool length offsets because I've got a tool probe in there. So it takes longer for me to actually type something in and worry about fat fingering it and smashing something than it does to just touch the tool off. So 100%. Lengths for me are never an issue, and it's so accurate too that I've really had almost no issues trying to blend stuff. We've talked about that before, but I've never really needed to tune anything to blend floor finishes. But also I like finishing floors with whatever the smallest tool I'm using too. So it's a waste of time, but it looks really good.
100%. I love a small step over. It always looks sexy, whether or not you burn a couple extra minutes running that little micro tool around, but is what it is. Yeah. The only issues I ever have, it seems like if I'm like getting lazy and like finishing a floor with like a tool that's been doing a lot of roughing and like, maybe I didn't tighten the collet down enough and it's kind of, moved out a thou or two somehow. And then all of a sudden I'm digging into the floor or blow a number. And it's like, probably should get a little bit more, put a little more thought into like my tools, what I'm doing with what, but sometimes you are a lazy bum and it doesn't always work out, but you need those checks. But yeah, I mean, that sounds like you had a good weekend. Did you, so you finish up slides? Do you have any more slides this week or are you done for the time?
No, I finished everything. I finished all of them last night. So I'm going to drop some of them. The shop that I do slide stuff for, they're not open on Mondays, so I'm going to drop those off tomorrow, and then the other ones I'm dropping off today to Cerakote.
Nice.
So yeah, I had a buddy who actually just went around his work and collected as many slides as he could and brought them all over. So
might as well, man. If
cool.
you're set up, knock them out.
Exactly. Every single one was different, but it was cool though. So that was nice. Cool thing about doing all the slide stuff is the cash flow is really good. There's no terms, there's none of that. So it's like, I don't ship them until I get paid. I don't drop them off. I'm not going to leave really unless I get paid. So it works out really well.
Yeah. You make, they pay. That's the way to do it, especially if they need the stuff. That's for certain.
Yeah. And there's always that kind of uncomfort the first couple times you go, or it's like, hey, you got to pay me. But now it's just, it's a routine now. So it works out really well.
Easy peasy.
And then, so today I'm going to pretty much I got, some of those extrusions, but I'm going to just be bandsawing pretty much all day and then get the mill going as soon as we're done with this. So I've built a long, really tall fixture. It's like 12 something inches tall with a vise on top of it sideways, so I can hold real long parts. So I'm going to get that in, but I had to write a safe tool change program for it so that it moves the table all the way away from the spindle and the tool change side, so that so it basically retracts the spindle to Z 4 inches positive, moves the table all the way to the side, and then it does the tool change with an M16 instead of M6, because M6, you just alias code in the control. So you can basically alias any program to whatever code you want. And if you have an alias program or like an alias G or M code, it prioritizes those over the factory M code. So if you alias M6, you don't have to change your post at all. You just tell it what program number to run when you call up M6. And that's that safe tool change program. And then within that, instead of M6, you just use M16, which is interchangeable with M6. And then at the end, it just jumps back and then it runs. So the normal program runs exactly the same straight out of Fusion. You don't have to change anything. Just on the control, you just turn that alias code on and off. So it works really well because I've got real long tools and then a really long fixture. Like everything would just crash. Probe is even too long to come over the top without coming up over. So I'll send you some pictures of it. It's pretty cool.
I'd love to check that out. Yeah, got to protect the probe, man. That's for sure.
Yeah. You have a halo on yours?
I have halos on both of them, yeah. Thankfully, I've never had any issues with them, but, sometimes I, too, get too speedy and, 0.3 becomes 3, and before you know it, you're going way too deep. I've not had it happen. And honestly, I haven't crashed a probe, knock on wood, since probably the second year that I started running CNC machines, but that still was one of the worst experiences of my life, burying the stylus in and completely crunching the body and I mean, not till to this day, even when I would train guys at my last job, it was rule number 1 is protect the probe, because nobody wants to be indicating in parts every day while it's out getting fixed, you know what I mean? And then I even think that a Renishaw repair, and we didn't even have these, the 40s, the smaller probes. The probes I had were big, 6.5-inch bodies that were the size of a damn Coke can. They're still Renishaws, but just older ones. And I think it was $4,000 to get them fixed, and it took them 5 or 6 weeks. They wouldn't even just send you a replacement. It was, we're going to straight up fix your probe, and who knows how long that takes. And anybody that's ever had to indicate parts in for a consistent amount of time knows that absolutely sucks.
It's a time suck. Renishaw does have a crash replacement program now. So you can send your smashed probe to Renishaw and you basically pay the full price of a new probe. But when they get yours, they send you a new one, or maybe it's refurbished, but they send you one. You basically buy the probe, they send you one, you send yours back, and they give you a huge credit for it. So it ends up being $1,400, something for a new body. Yeah, it's it may have changed now, but it's been a few years since I looked into it. But
that's dope.
Yeah, they're doing that. Bloom is starting to do that too now, but I think you have to go through Yamazen, and I think it's only one time. But you could basically buy a smashed probe, from eBay or whatever, send it to Renishaw and do that whole thing, and they'll give you a new one.
Get you a $1,400 brand new probe.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is that. But yeah, thankfully now with the probe halo and stuff, I'm a lot less sketched out about it. But luckily or thankfully, I've never smashed a probe. So
I always get worried about turning my spindle on with the probe in the spindle and breaking the tip. I know I used to have I don't know, I don't use them now, but the quick break connects that go between the stylus and the body, that if it goes above 3,000 RPM, the stylus will just break off and launch so that it doesn't damage the internals of the probe. Definitely have done that a couple of times.
Yeah,
especially when overriding I mean, I don't know how you have yours set up, but like both of my machines will still run with the door open. So like that was always my fear at my last job. On the Makinos I used to run, it was just a key. I don't know if, like stuff you've run in the past.
Out and,
they just turn it, like you just straight up turn it. It's like in like, you know, safe mode or manual mode. Mm-hmm. And a couple of times, like I had an indicator in the spindle, like on an indicall. And like one time I actually was standing out of the way at the machine control. I went to do a tool change, but somehow like didn't clear my MDI screen, kicked on to like 6,000 RPM, and my indicator shot out of this machine and hit the machine across the way and dented the hell out of the back of the sheet metal. And I'm like, dude, if I was standing in front of the machine, like the door, that would have like killed me. That was like my first like brush with death. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you know, like I still have like nightmares, like PTSD style about that. Like, man, I almost died. If that fucker hurt you in the face, you'd be toast. But
yeah, it's wild. Yeah, I don't ever really do anything with the doors open. Unless I'm cleaning out the machine. I've got magnets. I've stuck magnets up where I'm all backwards. I stuck some magnets up there and I just stick them under the proc sensors in the doors, and then the machine thinks the doors are shut. So
I just do that on one side over there. So obviously you need to be able to cycle it, but I took like a little end mill tube and I put a piece of metal in there and like stuck it up on the proc sensor. So it always thinks that door is closed, and you know, I can work with that door open. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I want my head in there, you know what I mean? I want to see what's going on, and if coolant's not on, you know.
Yeah, the thing that annoys me the most is that Haas's have this giant width right here, which is exactly in line with the spindle. So if you're trying to do anything and look at the machine straight on, you can't. You know, it blocks a ton of what you're actually trying to view.
It's super stupid, not smart.
Annoying. Yeah, so there's a bunch of little quirks. But to touch back on how you were talking about spinning your probe on there, at least on the next gen controls, you can put a max RPM for a tool number. So whatever probe tool number yours is, you can just put 0 as the max RPM on there and it won't turn on. No matter what.
I don't know any of this stuff. You know all the ins and outs of this. Like there's still things that I can't do that are like simple things on the Haas control that annoy me, but like I haven't gone to figure out how to do what I want. Like
we'll make a list.
I need to, and then I'll be like go over it with me, because there's a lot of stuff that ticks me off. But anyway, so that's but you have more of a like you have to know, as where like I'm big, I just work around stuff, you know what I mean? I probably should like fix problems when they arise, but instead I just like do things the hard way over and over again and just be frustrated about it every time I do it. But so you had a good week. What did I get into last week? Since we chatted. So I have been, the last day I was prepping blades, like taking these from like a water jetted blank. I'm prepping them for heat treat. So just like facing, you know, 5 aside off of them to get them to preheat treat thickness, you know, roughing in everything, chamfering everything. And I'm actually heat treating today. It's a new Mac project. I have like, you know, 90 blades for this job, out at double disc right now after water jet to get them to this thickness, but I held 10 back because I didn't think they'd be back in time. And so I'm heat treating now, and then those are going to get surface ground. In the meantime, I'm waiting for some titanium to come back, titanium parts, frames, spacers, clips for this new job. And actually my very first Mac project, the Sonic Doom, we're wrapping up the last batch right now. So our time commitment, 125 or 135 pieces is finished. We just have one last batch. And of course, over the year and some change that we've been working on it, I've scrapped all of my spare parts. And so this last batch, I actually don't have any frames for. So I had to have some, the last batch of frames cut out. So prepping to start on that, and wrapping up these last Mac projects by the 15th, which is when they're due, and then starting the next month's stuff. So been kind of focused on doing what I can here while I wait for those titanium parts, which should be here tomorrow. And then also I've been doing working on customs, which has been kind of refreshing, because I've spent so much time in the last year and a half focused on, you know, all these Mac projects that I didn't really have time to do the custom stuff to the extent that I really wanted to. And for the show that I just did in Portland a week and a half ago, I really allocated a bunch of time in July to prepping for that. And at the same time, I also cut a bunch of parts for like existing like book orders that I had. And so because I have that stuff laying out over here, like I've been taking some time to kind of finish those up as I have, you know, runtime. So it's been pretty rad to be able to like over the last a week, I've kind of had like 10 customs, head out of here, whether it be for the show or otherwise, which is in some years as many as I made in an entire year. So it's been pretty fun to get that stuff moving out the door. And I think people are fired up. Like I've been actually, Instagram hit me up, and I guess this has been happening to a lot of people, but they kind of said, hey, we're not distributing your content to new people anymore. As the ban or the, as they're just staying disgruntled towards weapons and stuff, that's just the stifling and stymieing of weapons-based content. So I've actually been starting to use my Facebook group more. And man, I've had like 100 and some people join in the last like week and a half, and like people are engaging, and it's pretty cool. I always kind of like brush Facebook off, but I know it's all meta, but it seems like to some extent you have a little bit more control, in your Facebook group.
Yeah, I even commented to yours and too the other day. I'm like, obviously it's the same company as Instagram, but Facebook groups are so much more core, and the people that are there are actually there for what you're posting or what your group is about. I have 2 or 3 Facebook groups now. I've got mine for my business Facebook group, and then I have like an owners group, which is still very small because there's not a lot of stuff out there, but and then I have a small business machining owners group too. That's actually another really core group. There's probably like 700 something people in there now.
Wow, that's growing quick. Didn't you just start like 6 months ago?
Less than that, probably just a couple months or whatever. But yeah, it's growing pretty quick, and everybody that's in there is all really cool. So I started it because a lot of the other Facebook groups are just like a mess. There's all kinds of just people talking shit and everybody giving advice that they have no idea what they're talking about. But for yours, it's so niche and it's so focused that everything that's being talked about in your group is obviously about your stuff. Versus Instagram, where you see posts from people that you don't even follow all the time. Like half the time I go to my feed, I'm like, they don't even follow this person. So yeah, it's frustrating for sure. I haven't gotten that shadow ban notification yet, but we'll see. I mean, pretty much all I post now is knives and firearm stuff. So
it'll catch up to you eventually. I mean, It's weird, right? Because you can go and check your account status, and I appealed it. So I don't know if this is why it's not showing anything, but like I'm still green. All the metrics, like you can post, you don't have anything that needs to be taken down. There's like 4 metrics that they have there with like green check marks next to them. So I'm still good to go. I had people reach out that were like, hey, I've been getting this message like once a month for a year, and like they haven't done anything. I have other people that are like, I have stopped using Instagram because of this. So, I mean, when you have as many, how many users do they have? 100 million? You know what I mean? At some point, it's like they can only police you so hard, So I'm not too worried about it. We're just going to keep moving in the same, whatever direction we can. I'm actually going to switch gears and start using my email list quite a bit for product distribution, just because obviously if you have 10,000 person email list and nobody can do anything about that except for unsubscribe if they don't like the content. So, I think that's the way to go. That's where the power lies. If social media folded up tomorrow, email's not going anywhere. So that's a great way to distribute content. So I think, any purchases made going forward, lotteries and stuff are going to require like email list, being on the email list in order to be able to win or get that kind of stuff, just to kind of push people in that direction. And then I think, as long as you're not spamming them with crap, as long as every piece of content that you send is meaningful and like, you're not sharing their information, like I don't see any reason why anybody would unsubscribe. So that's kind of my move, but yeah, so that's where I've been. I think it's a good one, man. But yeah, that's where I've been at the last week, kind of just status quo, trying to wrap some stuff up. Summertime's coming to an end for the kids. And so kind of been trying to spend some time with them. I'm heading to camp today, actually, this afternoon. My wife's already out there with some of my other family members, and we're going to, swim in the pond and fish and do some s'mores and fire stuff, and just a last hoorah for the summer season, and then, move right into fall. I also realize I've done like nothing for me. Like this time of year is hunting preparation time. Like archery season opens in 2 months, and I haven't done any trail camera stuff. I haven't done any property management, anything. So I'm like starting to get that itch too, which is bad timing with this show coming up, but that's one thing as a small business owner. Sometimes your hobbies and stuff get sidelined. It's just a, necessity. And like, I've always said that, gun to my head, if you could be an archery hunter or like make knives, like I'll choose archery hunting every day, so it's a hard thing for me to do, like to not go into as prepared as I usually want to be, but we're really putting our best foot forward with the business side of things, see if we can't make this work. But But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. So your kids are starting school soon, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I guess we have another like 2 weeks or whatever, but it's actually a big deal for us because my youngest, so for people that don't know, I have 5 kids. My oldest is 13. My youngest just turned 3 a couple of days ago. But my youngest is actually starting like an all-day preschool, which typically that was resigned for like 4-year-olds. But the program that we've used for like 3 of my 4 other kids is switching to allowing 3-year-olds and allowing all day, which I think that means like 9 to 2:30. Like it's not truly all day, but so yeah, I'll have for the first time in 13 years, I'll have all my kids in school, which is pretty wild. So my wife is going to have some free time and yeah, so we're looking forward to giving that a try. But yeah, they'll be in soon enough, and then this place is going to feel like a ghost town again during the day. No little pitter patter of feet running in and out of here, taking waters from the fridge, or bringing me snacks or whatever they do. So
you're gonna miss it,
dude. They grow up in a hurry, man. But yeah, we'll talk about that forever.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of looking at our timing here, so we're a little bit beyond where we wanted to for our first segment, like as expected, but. I don't know if you want to like segue into a couple of these questions from some people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We got a bunch. So I don't know if we're going to get to all of them today, but the first one that came through, which was cool, it's from August Originals. I think these are all from Instagram, right? And all yours coming from Instagram?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm interested in getting a CNC in my shop. Any recommendations on a smaller benchtop option? I think probably one of the best options, at least from my limited research on this, is all the stuff from Shapeoko or Carbide 3D, right? Their Shapeoko line looks pretty good. The 5 Pro, I think they've all got linear rails, ball screws, great service. So I would personally probably go with one of those. Like I have a Sureline CNC mill, but it's on lead screws, it's on open steppers, and like it loses position, and it's a cool little machine, but it's tiny little 40-pound mill. So if I was buying something new, a benchtop something, I would probably personally go with a Shapeoko. If anybody has any other recommendations, let us know. You can comment, I think even right in the actual, obviously YouTube comments, or in Spotify, there's a question on there. I think you can just answer some stuff in there, or hit us up on Instagram. So
nice. Yeah, I have a couple of buddies that have Shapeokos, and like one of them cuts a lot of titanium, like finished, like 3D features and stuff, and like stuff looks pretty good. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get the off the machine finishes that you'd be looking for to like distribute finished product, but minimal handwork probably puts you in a position to be to the good. And I think they're only like $2,500 or something
like that. Yeah, they're a few grand. They have a new one that I think it's like $4 or $5 grand for their latest, biggest, best one. But even
does it have an enclosure?
I don't think so. I probably should pull up the website and look. But yeah, Shapeoko, check it out. That would probably be my first recommendation, especially for knife stuff. Anything you're doing that's real thin, kind of router-like parts, is perfect for that.
I also had seen like Yoni has a couple of those Axiom Precisions. And then I actually saw one of those too when I was at Cole Iron Works. They have one for doing like handle material work. Seems like just a little bit more robust. They also have like a nice stand and, on wheels and stuff. So you have a little bit of modularity also. But I think that between that and the Shapeoko are probably the directions that I would go.
Yeah. My first recommendation for anybody buying any machines is just buy a Brothers PTO and be done with it. That's what I should have done. I think that's what everybody should do. But yeah.
It's tough, man, because if you don't start small, you don't appreciate, how much better the good shit is.
Yeah.
And even like me digressing, like going from the Makino back down to like the Tormacher into a Haas, like there are things about lesser expensive machines that are not desirable. And it's funny because like people, this is an interesting thing that I've experienced with like some of the Mac guys that don't have any expectations of CNC. They think a machine is a machine is a machine. And like there's like some surface finish stuff or like repeatability, like on the Haas, that like when you try and explain to them that like you're operating within the limitations of this machine, and they're like, you have $100,000 machine, why is it not capable of that? And it's like, yeah, but it's not a $500,000 machine, which is like, like the step up from a Tormach to a Haas, and then a Haas to like a Makino, or even like some of the nicer Akumas or whatever, you get even to a $250,000 machine, like just what they're capable of, their look ahead, their smoothing and stuff. It's like, people don't understand that there's tiers to this stuff. They just assume that you're running a robot, so it should do exactly what you want. And it's like, how many times have you had like an issue with with posted code? You know what I mean? Where, hey, it looks great in the computer, and like you post it out and you're getting weird gouging, and it's, then like you can't figure it out, and you're trying to talk to your customer like, I don't know why this is doing this. I've tried everything. It's just this weird spot in this part. Model's good. I don't know what's going on. And it's like they just don't get it, So
yeah, I've had that issue. I had that issue when I was doing application stuff. There was a customer that called us and he was like, hey, we're using Mastercam. We're on a Brother. We're getting this weird faceting tessellation on their surfacing. So I go in there and it was literally just their arc filtering settings within Mastercam, which Fusion has, and pretty much every cam software has arc filtering or at least some smoothing on there. And their settings were just way too high. So it was taking the shortest path it could, and it was leaving these faceted surfaces around.
Yeah, no blending at all. It's just point to point, little micro.
So I just reprogrammed it right there on the spot. I just modeled it up and reprogrammed it, posted it, and gave it to them, and then their programmer quit the next day. It's kind of a shitty situation, but I mean,
hey man,
it's sometimes there are some back-end settings, like Fusion has some surface triangulation settings. If you right-click the toolpath, you go to compare and edit, and then search for tolerance, just TOL. It'll pop up. There's only like 10 things on there. It's surface triangulation tolerance. Make that setting way smaller, and 100% your 3D toolpaths will be way smoother than they were before. I guarantee it.
Tightens it right up.
Yeah, because it's, at least on Fusion, it's making basically like a tessellated model in the back end, as far as I understand it. That's based off of your tolerance and all your smoothing settings and everything. And it's programming off of that. So if you have a huge tolerance on there, it's making this big faceted kind of low poly type whatever model in the back end, and it's just following whatever that is. So
for the users, when you're saying like a really big tolerance, like what would be considered a really big tolerance in that parameter?
I think anything more than a few thou. Normally I'll set my basic tolerance. I set to 5/10, and then my arc filtering or smoothing tolerances I'll do just kind of rule of thumb, like 4 times bigger than that. I just have a calculation in their equation. It's taking my tolerance setting times 4, so it's usually like around 2 thou.
Okay. See, mine's 2/10 absolute, and then I use a 1/1000 arc tolerance, which seems to be just fine.
Yeah, and if you're cutting a round bore, it's going to just do whatever it needs to do. I mean, it's going to post out as an IJ.
Circle. yeah.
Circle. It's the same thing. So it's not like it's going to be 2 thou small or whatever, it's just so. There's a lot of
we deep dive, right? This was asking about a basic benchtop CNC, and now we're talking about surface tessellation and like arc smoothing tolerances. Oops.
Yeah. There's guys that know this stuff way more detailed as far as what it's actually called and all that. I know how to get it done.
But we're supposed to be catering this podcast to machinists that are making knives and guys that are, I'm not saying them type of dudes are dumb, but maybe we're better off trying to keep it a little bit less technical. It's hard though. When that's how you think, that's how you talk, it just is what it is.
I'm partially retarded too. So,
you're just on the spectrum, man. That's all it is.
Getting some of these thoughts out is kind of tough for me. I don't know all the words. So, there was a few other ones on here. Do you want to go over any of these other ones? I mean, I want to go over we could easily. There's some on here that we could easily talk for a couple hours on, like easily.
I mean, why don't we pick a simple one? Like, what drives you to continually improve? Like, it's pretty open-ended, but like, I think for us, because of how we are, that's a question. There's a lot of people that find a way to do something, especially like guys that are like new to CNC. And their goal is just to find something that works, not necessarily to improve a process to be as efficient as possible. And so I think that for us, because we've spent our careers problem solving, looking for efficiencies, and continually improving for like whatever company we're working for, I think that the reason I try and continually improve is just because I'm addicted to finding efficiencies. Like once your programs are running, we're finding like small nuances in like how tools are moving between sequences, or like, trying to improve our roughing strategies for tool life. Like at some point, if you're not chasing those things, it can get kind of monotonous. Like you're just more or less in a production environment where you're just hitting the green button over and over again. And if you know, you stare at something like that long enough with the right eye, you're going to see things that you can improve. So I think probably a lot of mine just out of boredom. I don't know where yours comes from, but that's definitely for me.
Yeah, I just enjoy the process of that stuff. I mean, I don't care too much. I mean, I do, but when I talk about like continuous improvement, I'm not really talking too much about like lean manufacturing as far as, you know, I don't want to twist and do this. I don't want to have to reach or bend. Like I end up doing that all the time because I'm in my little garage. So for me, the continuous improvement stuff is mainly really over process reliability, process efficiency, mainly from the point of CAD through CAM, through setup, through like parts, trying to handle parts less by improving surface finishes or by probing and taking spring passes and doing all that stuff. So for me, I enjoy the process. I enjoy trying to figure out some of these puzzles of like, why is this part taking this long? You know, it shouldn't take that long. It should take this long. And then going through the CAM if I can, or just going through the actual posted code in something like Simco or any kind of back plotter and seeing, all right, well, this drill's going up and it's feeding from the clearance plane at 3 inches up above it because it had to clear a clamp. And now the cycle time's 45 minutes when it should have been 6.
Why is it not rapiding down to your, you know, plane? Yeah, your 0.1.
That was actually something that I went through a couple jobs ago before when I transitioned from working on the shop floor as a setup guy into a manufacturing engineer. I was running a job. They were making 3 parts an hour on it. They ran the job at a loss, but it was part of a family of parts that they were making and doing a sub-assembly for. So they had to
making money on the sub-assembly as a whole, but losing money on that component.
Exactly. And everybody that would run that job had to no-man that job, where it was nobody could log time on it. Just anybody that was around that was free had to make sure that thing kept running. So every, you know, it was 3 parts on the setup. The cycle time took like an hour. And I was running the mill right next to it when I started. So I was running that one. I was running a brother right behind me. It was a Maury, a brother, and then most of them were Maurys on that area. So I was running that job, just basically loading and doing some inspection while I was prioritizing a couple other machines. And I watched the cycle the first couple times that it ran just to get familiar with the parts and get familiar with how all the tools were running and everything. And just watching it in the very first cycle, there was literally a drill that was going up 3 inches to clear some stuff. And it was feeding from 3 inches above all the way down. And I asked the guys, I'm like, what the hell's going on with this? Like, did anybody even realize this? This job's been running for like 15 years. Who knows how long that had been happening, but they're like, oh yeah, but we don't log time onto it. We don't care. I'm like, well, I'm going to fix this shit. So I ended up just fixing all that stuff, cut a bunch of time off of it. And then they were roughing with a 1-inch Kennametal indexable end mill, 3 flute. And nobody liked running it because when those things would go, they would go. They didn't have like tool life and stuff really dialed on it. So, and the guys in the shop floor didn't know any better. So they would just run it until the insert would pop and then they would go swap it out. And so I'm like, fuck this. I'm going to put a 7 flute, 1/2-inch solid carbide end mill in here, run an adaptive tool path on it. And then ended up going back in and doing some double angle stuff and changed up a lot of the tools. We got rid of like 5 tools on that job and got it down to from 3 parts an hour to about 9 parts an hour on that one.
So you tripled the efficiency.
Yep. And the tool life went way up. Perishable tooling cost went way down. We did a lot of studies on all that. There's actually a question on here about kind of diminishing return and stuff. And, you know, at what point is the profit margin not worth the wear and tear? That kind of came into play with that whole thing where it's like, all right, we're going to test this tool. How many minutes can we get for this tool? We can push it harder, but we're going to go less tool life on it, but our output's going to be higher. So we're actually going to be making more money, even though we're spending more on perishable tooling. So there's a fine line in there with, you know, figuring out the calculations and stuff and doing that all in Excel and Google Sheets is something that I've worked on for years, trying to get, you know, a really, really dialed and repeatable calculation for that kind of stuff where you can just plug in your price and plug in your tool life and it'll tell you where that point of diminishing return is. But
yeah, not to downplay that question. I think that's one that we're going to get into at a later date just because it involves a lot more. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. You know, it depends on what you're trying to do in the background too, right? Like, you know, slower cycle time if you have a lot to be doing with your hands, to me, sometimes it's an upside, like to a fault, right? A lot of times at my last job where they were just counting spindle up time, and you'd see guys turn down feed rates or be less aggressive because, hey, the spindle's running, we're making less parts, but at least the spindle's running. I never agreed with that, but there are times where if I'm making a custom and I just want to keep the machines running in the background and I don't want an 8-minute cycle time for a backspacer, I would prefer that if it was 15 minutes. I'm not saying I would tune that down, but I certainly would choose to run a part that took a little bit longer when I'm not just having an attended machining day. And so for a machine like that, where you're not logging time, you know, not distracting guys from like the jobs they're trying to be attended onto with a little bit longer cycle time, like even if it means less parts per hour, but less downtime, like it might be a wash. Like that's a hard thing to factor in, right? It's like, well, what if guy A takes 3 shits a day and he misses that, when the machine shuts off and he's not there to switch the parts, like you lost that time anyways. And like you're paying for the tooling because you're working, you're running them harder as it is. There's always that balance, but yeah, that's something I think we fight on every job we do. It's just about that comes down to in a one-man shop, just like your own personal logistics. You know what I mean? Planning.
Exactly.
If I'm running 2 machines and I'm trying to heat treat and I'm trying to finish machines or finish knives, I'm in there grinding away from. That's the other thing. My grinding room's enclosed. I have a window, but I can't see the super mini mill from that window, so I can't tell if the red light's beeping. I have to have a timer on my watch running that gives me an alarm 2 minutes before the machine shuts off so that I'll run out here and be ready to switch parts. So it's, you're building your efficiencies around, who you are and how you do things. But
yeah, totally. That's like the question, what's your biggest bottleneck? And that for sure is just me. I know for sure that I'm the biggest bottleneck in here because I'm busy with my family or I get distracted easily with stuff. And there's just constant distractions. I'll be looking for a tool and I'll find a knife that I haven't found in a while and I'll pull that out. Now I'm playing with this for freaking 10 minutes,
Yeah, so, dude, it's too easy, man. I remember when you got that thing. That thing's badass. But
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it used to be me, I think. But I've had to set some boundaries. Like it's tough in the summertime, but like my wife knows, when I'm working, and like if it's something that can wait, she'll wait to approach me about it. The kids will kind of leave me be. So I've really been getting in the zone, especially as my schedule has been filling up more and more. Like I know you have a lot of kind of flexibility, with just working on job shop stuff. Now that I'm beholden to a lot of people every month for like component assemblies, and like I have no time to be late. If I'm 4 days late, then that's 4 days less time that I have to get the next month's stuff rolling. And so I've been compound. So I've been working really hard to stay on track. And so, yeah, I don't tend to have too many issues with personal bottlenecks for me, just for the sake of finishing the question. My biggest issues stem around like processing of blades, just because with any titanium component, right? Like you get the parts water jetted, you do op 1, you do op 2, they're done in-house, everything's finished. With blades, that's the only thing that I'm outsourcing stuff for beyond water jet. So like, the blade material comes in from water jet and I'm sending it to double disc to get it to within 10 thousandths of finished thickness. Then I'm doing pre-heat treat machining. In these bigger batches, then I'm outsourcing heat treating. Then I'm having them drop ship directly from heat treat right to the lapping company that I use. And they're getting me the parts to my final thickness. Well, it's like when everybody's lead time is 5 days to 3 weeks, you're trying to communicate with everybody, but that's where I'm having the biggest struggle is like, how can I change my process for these last batch of Mac knives? I had all the blades wire EDM'd, but that was an even bigger thing, which is like heat treat to lapping to wire EDM. We had some issues with wire where parts had to be reworked, and then I had to get some custom hardware to make them work. They're dealing with all these things. A job that on paper probably should have only taken like a month between 4 shops ended up taking like 2.5 months. So now we're back to the drawing board of like, okay, how much, if I'm not wiring things, what do I have to do pre-heat treat versus how much of it do I want to do post-heat treat? Like the first batch of blades, the Datums, when I did them, I left 50 thousandths on the profile thinking like, okay, yeah, that's good. And like, I have a hardened steel machining background, like 50,000, not that much. Well, I also wasn't paying for tooling back then. And also I was running a $375,000 Makino and not doing them on a super mini, $50,000 Haas, so like there's not the rigidity. And then when you're sitting there, 2D contouring 50 thousandths off, stepping over 5 thousandths a pass and still blowing through an $80 end mill in 10 parts. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be cognizant of those changes. But yeah, so that's my biggest bottleneck, and that's where I'm spending the most of my time, is finding better ways to manufacture blades. So yeah, that's my biggest hang up right now, I think.
Yeah, when we were originally talking about the datums, it was really because you've done so many now since I did them. And when I did them way different than I want to do them now, where I would basically do all of my machining soft. Everything was soft. The only thing that I would leave stock on would be the flats. Then I would leave 5 thou per side or 10 thou total on that. And then they would go to heat treat. They'd come back. I'd finish surface grinding, and then I would finish the pivot bore. But everything else was done. All of the sharpening and all of the lock fitting and everything would be done by the customers typically. I don't want to do that now because with the design of the datum, I have to make sure that these primaries are dead nut straight, or else the primary is going to contact the blade or the frames.
Yep. Because you have that little trough in the integrated backspacer, right? So you have no margin for what kind of clearance do you have from the primary to that V? Like 5 thou?
I have it modeled right now. Everything has 10 thou clearance all around it. So there's 10 thou gaps between the frames and the blades. There's 10 thou gaps between the actual primaries and stuff. I probably should just screen share some of that stuff. Maybe next episode we'll jump on and I'll kind of screen share some of that and try and focus a little bit more, I think, on kind of our process on this stuff. Because I definitely want to get into that more, because I do need to figure out what my next 5 or so weeks are going to be like on datums, because now I'm going to probably be done with everything else.
Crunch time, motherfucker.
Within the next couple days. So then I have to do nothing but knife stuff. So that was kind of what we originally started talking about, was like, all right, I have 10 different ways I want to make these blades. I don't know which one's going to be the best one, where I'm going to be roughing everything before heat treat and then come back and finish after heat treat. Which is kind of where I'm at. I left 5 thou stock on all the profiles, including the stop pin track, the window, the outside profiles. I left 5 thou on the primaries. And then because of the blade thickness, the stock that I had, I only had 3 thou per side for surface grinding. So I didn't even touch the faces, but I bought actually ground material from, I think it was from AKS for this MagnaCut. So for this one, I just need to remove 5 thou from all the surfaces and then finish all the chamfers. But I'm concerned because I don't have any frames. I haven't made my frames yet. So I actually want to make some frames before I finish my first blade, so that I can actually test primarily in the closed position.
Need to be able to test assemble for sure.
Because I need, not even so much just for the detent, but I haven't cut any detent yet. I haven't finished the stop pin track yet. There's still, like I said, 5 thou per side on there. And even, 1 thou all the way out here might translate to 15 thou at the tip.
Dude, it's a lot.
Depending on the radius of your stop pin track and how far your blade is and everything. And the way that I design knives, I primarily design my stuff in the closed position, more so than the open position. I think for me personally, the closed position is the most important out of all of it. And you look at all these knives and like, wow, that looks awesome when it's open, but it looks like, ass
ugly when it's closed.
More
yes.
blades
Like, why is
there?
there?
Frame. So this is one of the finished ones. This is one that Bestech made, 1 out of 3. So in the closed position, everything is flush. Like the blade is, I'm not trying to do this all backwards. The blade is completely flush with that. The tip drops down a few thou in there. But the datum, actually, all of these gaps are gone. Those big triangle gaps, they're completely gone. I mean, there's a V in there for this one, but I ended up removing the backspacer. The frames meet in the middle, and then it's all surfaced where that is.
Nice.
So everything is completely closed. So it's extremely critical for me to have some form of frame, or at least a functional gauge made, that I can put it in. So, I'll put it down the primary, the secondary will be the pivot, and then the tertiary will be the end of the stop pin track in the closed position, or a tertiary for the open position. I probably have 2 different ones, where it's got to go to a specific position and then set up an indicator on there to where I can dial that in to where, all right, I know that's going to be 0. So it drops on the fixture, rotates to a drop indicator, and then I can verify that value right there. So that's kind of what I'm going to plan on doing for the blades, but I need to make some frames first, and I need to kind of develop all that stuff. So I'm going to probably get those blades back from you anytime now, I would imagine.
Yeah, I gotta pack them. I gotta pack them up. They're sitting over there. I actually have to ship a knife today, and I'm going out of town. So I was going to pack those up, pack this knife up, drop them off at the post office on my way out the door. So you'll have them.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's for sure. I would something like I've been bitten by that stop pin track too many times. Like I only left 5 thou in there. So I'll just profile it finished with like an 1/8 inch bullnose. But then like you don't realize that it's deflecting a half or 7/10 or 1/1000.
Mhm.
Well, you can't check it in the assembly without grinding that tab off of there because the blade won't close. You grind the tab off, you go to put it in there, and the tip is sticking up 10/1000 because you had a thou still in there. So I've just gotten in the habit of like redundantly cutting that, even if it means an extra 5 minutes per part. I'll rough it, semi-finish it, and finish it with a tool, just so that I know that every time that wall is going to be true, because that is like, then you're getting in there and I'm sitting there with a Dremel, or like I chuck up on an 1/8 inch end mill in my mill and I bring it down, the quill down, and I lock it. And I'm sitting there manually routering the end of the stop pin track, taking a couple of thousands out of there. And it sucks. You have to do it because you can't set it back up. I mean, I take that back. I can set up this magnetic side plate in the machine, hold the blade, on there and remachine the stop pin track that way. But like, it's just a big time suck. So like I try and avoid that stuff. And that's something I definitely will redundantly recut. And it's not as big of a big deal in the open position, because who notices 10,000th different blade opening at the tip, you know what I mean? But it's so apparent when it's in the closed position that you have to be careful.
I have the tip dipping down probably 10 or 15 thou, so that there's no risk of catching your finger on that. That's always been an issue on some, where you can actually feel the edge.
Hell yeah.
This one's buried in there pretty good, and with the V it's real close, so I can't do it on here. But one of the ones that I got from Best Tech, it actually sticks out just a little bit. So I can catch my finger on it if I'm going.
You can catch it. You could open yourself up real bad on a tip like that. People don't know that. Stick it up 5,000ths. If you make a 5,000th laceration the entire length of your knuckle, like you're going to be bleeding like crazy. The one nice thing is, you always can, if you need to in a pinch, set up and just kiss the tip on the grinder. Especially because the Datum has arc, and arc, the top of it is an arc. You can blend that. As we're on the transient, it's a straight line. So it's a very noticeable dip if you have like a double angle or something on there versus blending the end of your arc segment. So you have a little bit of flexibility there.
I was thinking about
obviously off the machine, you want to be dialed.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I could grind it, but then I'd have to grind the chamfers too. I didn't put a swedge on here. I do like swedges, but I didn't put a swedge on here because I want this thing as flush as possible when it's closed. That was the primary driver on this whole thing. There was a question actually on here about design and stuff, doing some unique stuff. So for me personally, it's designing something when it's in the closed position. And we had talked about logos too. I'm probably going to do logo on, because the pocket clip is so big. There's so much real estate on here. I think I'm going to probably do how I do my slides. I'll do the outline, and then I'll do a parallel toolpath of the floor on it. Just on the fat part of the pocket clip. So when it's in your pocket, it's upright. I was thinking about maybe even doing one up here on this face, but I think on the pocket clip's cool. Should be.
I think doing it on a flat surface versus like on the 3D is probably smart to start. But yeah, I'm not a big I don't like billboarding. You know what I mean? Like I really don't like when it's like flamboyant on the show side. Like on the block side, not as big of a deal. But I want the show side of the open position to be just deadly clean. So actually, like when I was making those for you, I actually put your logo on the inside of the frame, but you could still see it visibly from the closed position. But like, I think that the clip is a nice place. Obviously, that's where I just landed on putting my logo too, and I'm really enjoying that.
Yeah, it looks good. That or inside too. Inside's cool. When I did all those blades for boosts, I diamond dragged inside the frames, and it was just a simple outline diamond drag after it was all kind of Sasha gray, which is really just aggressive media blast, and then rubbed it with white lithium grease to make it
Secrets
dark.
out. Secrets out.
So it gives a real nice dark gray finish. But also, we do the grease to darken it, but you don't get fingerprints.
No fingerprints. I still do that to this day.
I do it on everything, and
you gotta give. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, there's probably some credit where it's due, I'm sure. So I do it on pretty much everything, even like my slingshots and stuff. The inlays, like I'll rub them with grease, not the anodized ones, but all the blasted ones. But I'll do a mix of like blast and then grease, or blast a little bit, tumble and then grease. It gives it a really good finish. So
do you use the aerosol version, or do you have like a tub of white lithium that you use?
I have a tube, and I've been like,
Nice.
I'm as far as I can reach in that.
It's tapped.
So it's tapped. So sometimes I'll use the part and I'll get in there, but now, so I
I use
gotta
the spray version, but
I gotta
it's kick, dude. I got nothing in here.
I gotta get some of that for sure. Yeah, it's nice. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna be doing next, or not next, but not next week. I was gonna say it, but next after I finish these extrusions, I'm probably gonna jump on. See, part of me wants to just jump on pocket clips and get the pocket clips done. I hate making pocket clips, but doing them in the strip, how I do them, where they're all ganged and they're all surfaced across, and then they just tap them out. That works really well, and those are done and they're off my plate. I kind of want to do that, but
don't do it.
But
do the hardest shit first, dude. You have to.
Yeah,
the pocket clip means nothing if it doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Of course. Part of me wants to do that, and while that's running, do all the stop pins and do all that stuff. So all of this kind of peripheral stuff is just done, and I don't have to think about it. Where it's like I'm spending the next 5 weeks making the frames and making the blades super dialed, and then like I have 2 days to make pocket clips. But
the difference is it can be done in 2 days.
Of course,
you get to the finish line and like
I gotta make frames. And got a week left.
Yeah, I mean that's just straight cycle time. You know what I mean? And like, I personally, I always leave clips to the end. And until you have a working assembly, I would not. Now, if you get through it and you prove it out and it works, and you're like, hey, okay, now I'm gonna run pocket clips. I'll get into frames towards the tail end. I'll have the cycle time. That gives the machine still running while I'm able to sit there and start to assemble knives and be finishing and having spindle up time. I can understand that, but you for sure, at the very least, have to prove out your fixture that you want to make, prove out that your primary is machined how you want and your blades are finished, and prove out a set of frames. I would probably go through and prove out an entire assembly before running all your parts and realizing you need to make a change. You know what I mean?
That's true. Because I only have enough material right now for probably. Well, I only had enough material for 15 blades.
Yeah.
Because this tab is so big on the bottom, I would have been able to fit like 20, but I'm sacrificing blades because I do want this rigidity. That's an issue that everybody has that machines blades, because they put the tab on the top.
Yeah.
And then they surface the primary. I used to do this too. They surface the primary. The first side's great. You do the second side and there's nothing supporting it. I've had edges actually just completely curl over, and then I'm picking them on the bench and I'm smacking them back flat before heat treat, and then they go to heat treat and then they warp. So with this, it adds all the rigidity for that. It also helps for surface grinding. Nothing can tip. And then if you're stoning or you're lapping, you don't get that big rolled over edge right there on the thin section, because you're still contacting the paper or the plate up here. Overall, this system has worked out way better than anything that I've done in the past. And then if, when I stand them up, the end mill is going right above that, and it's just hitting the side right on an angle with just a simple 2D or a trace on this, because I got to come up the belly. But the tool path is really just a simple curve and then another curve. But I've done where I have support material on the bottom to try and alleviate some of that bounce, where I'll surface a negative of this on the fixture for the second side. And that always sucks too, because you take a couple extra thou off here, you're still not contacting. Or you take off not enough, and now the whole thing's sitting too high. And it's personally, I think it's a terrible system doing it that way. And this, for me at least, has been the best way of making machine blades. It allows you to lay them flat and surface it. It allows you to stand them up and profile it if you want. The only issue is there was something that I was thinking about the other day that may be an issue, but I left enough clearance on here that it doesn't matter. So really, moving forward, this one I surfaced the whole thing with just a ball in mill, because I had one in there. Normally, if I'm surfacing this stuff, I'll use a bull nose to get the surface footage up higher. But moving forward on all the ones, because I'll have the fixtures done at that point, I'll rough them on an angle. So they'll sit up on an angle, and I'll just rough them with a 1/2 inch mill. And they'll be much faster. This took I think 9 minutes per side, and standing them up, it takes less than 2 minutes for both sides. And that was, so like almost 20 minutes to surface this thing, and that should be like 2 minutes standing up. So that'll be much better.
Surface finish that's way easier to clean up, side mill, side milling tool marks versus like the scallops of stepping over with a bull nose. You almost have a machine finish off the machine that's serviceable if you tumble it, versus with that, you almost have to stone it and sand it to get it smooth.
Yeah, or you got to do a really, really small step over to get your cuss pipe tiny.
Yeah, you're shooting that for that 1/10 cuss pipe, but even like a 3/8, even if you use a 3/8 ball, it's only like 7/1000 to maintain a 1/10 scallop height. So it's like no matter which way you slice it. And then if you're using a big tool like that, your tab has to be even more offset, so you're not running into it as the end mill's running off the edge of the blade. People don't think about this stuff.
Exactly, and that's why this thing is so big, because I did lay it flat and I left a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the blade and basically where the tab starts. Standing it up, though, you don't need that much room because the bottom of the tool only has to go 10, 15
whatever
below the edge.
Whatever the bullnose corner is needs to clear the end.
You don't need it on the bottom because it's fairly straight, but you need some clearance up in the front because the leading edge of the tool,
it's going to step off further to be able to maintain the tangency while it comes off. Yeah, for sure.
But there's still plenty of support on this whole thing. So yeah, I mean, we just hit the hour mark. I could go on all day long. I mean, we talk about this all the time, and I probably bring it up just being conscious about this stuff, but I think we're going to probably just naturally get into this flow a lot better. And I think answering the questions kind of how we did was cool. We know kind of what people are asking about, and we can just talk about them and kind of answer them without specifically calling out a very specific question.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to look at the list and be like, okay, what's actually kind of playing into what we're talking about, and then just segueing right into it.
Exactly. Yeah,
that worked out good.
Yeah,
you're right. So that did creep up on us, though. That hour peeled right off. I mean, I think we probably just can quickly jump into the what do you have going on for the week ahead. I know we just talked quite a bit about it, but
yeah. So yeah, I'm going to knock out these extrusions over the next day, probably day and a half. There's 2 different sizes. So once those are done, while those are running, I'm going to be saw cutting titanium for the frames. So once those are out, I'm basically going to just jump on frames, probably make, because I have this one already. I could just put this back in my fixture that I already have made, my general one, and finish it. So it's completely done. And then finish a set of frames, and then I can fit all this stuff together. I do, because I'm retarded, I have to sharpen this blade before it will even close in the frame all the way too. That's how close the frame is. So I probably could just put clearance in there.
Make you a set of test frames that has clearance to be able to test fit the shit.
So test frames is probably what I'm going to do first.
And then you can carry that motherfucker yourself.
Exactly. So I'm probably going to do that actually absolutely first, is make test frames or a test fixture for the frame that mimic the frames, kind of a virtual condition of that. And then finish this blade. So, and then jump into frames. But I think frames are my goal for this week for sure. Finishing this blade and doing some frames. I do need to finish, I do need to finish the design of how the lock bar is going to assemble into frames. That's one thing that I've been on the fence about a lot, because I don't want screws going all the way through it. I'm not doing a typical frame lock. I'm going to do an inset lock because I want to make frames out of different materials. I don't want to do a full liner. It's just literally going to be an insert inside the frame that houses.
And honestly, it solves a lot of problems too, especially with that knife, because you have the relief on the inside of the frame. That dialing that in when it's encapsulated on all 4 sides, like when I made the ones I made, I had to make some really. It's hard, man, because I was adjusting radiuses and thicknesses, and trying. You have, because it's like right on where your frame steps down for the pocket clip. There's not the fulcrum point is not just a continuous area. It was a really big pain in the ass to get like the detent of the lock bar pressure dialed in. So if you have that inset and you can just do a traditional like 42 thousandths like lock bar relief and like keep your action dialed that way, you're probably going to have a lot easier time.
It's going to be much easier. It's going to be much cleaner. I don't have to send the frames out for wire. I don't want to mill them because I don't like big gaps in there. I was originally going to wire them, and then I was going to use some U and V action in there to come across and then undercut a section to create the over travel stop, which, I don't know if anybody's ever done that. And if you're in a position to be using wire EDM, I mean, feel free, but I don't think the average people are going to be doing that. But
nope.
I don't want to inset. I don't want to put a lock insert onto an insert lock bar.
You were going to 4th axis cut the lock bar cut so that it almost had like an angular stop where it couldn't travel past whatever the clearance is for the thickness. So you're going to have your 10 thousandths wide track, which is going to let it run up,
but
and
the
then
bottom's going to move out of the way. Yep. So the top would stay. I mean, the top would have to move a little bit to maintain that straight look, but the bottom would come out of the way a little bit and create an undercut under the frame. So the lock bar 100%. Can't over travel.
That's cool.
So there's no, like the integral that I did that was TIG welded, that one had a key cut section in there.
The only problem you'd ever have is if you put too much lock bar tension on the lock bar, you'd never be able to push it the other way to remove that tension. So don't put too much tension on your lock bar. Anyways, we're gonna dive into this too hard. We're gonna peel off time here.
So I'm gonna frames for sure for me. That's primary. Fixture and frames.
Your thing. Nice. I'm finishing up Mac stuff this week, planning out my my builds for the Maker Syndicate show. Chatting with Logan from Northwest Blade Works / Coal Iron Works. He's going to be coming up here because we made some stainless Damascus in Indiana about 2 months ago, and he's going to come to town, and we're going to build some knives with that. Our Bromascus collab that we're doing, and that's actually going to be debuted at Indianapolis. He lives just outside of Indianapolis, so he's going to be at the table with me. So we're trying to set that up. And yeah, just kind of status quo around here. Not a lot of new implementation. Just we're going to test the processes that I got in place last month for Portland and see if Mac production / custom production stuff can run in parallel with one another like it did last month, but better, and see if we need to make any adjustments. So that's where I'm at for this week. Sounds like we both got a full plate ahead of us, but thank you everybody for checking in with us this week. It was our pleasure to kind of chat with you and test this this new approach to answering questions and stuff like that. If you have any feedback or want to chit chat with us, feel free to contact us individually at our Instagrams. I'm hmc.knives. Ken is Zodiac Engineering. We also have the Sharpened Perspectives podcast Instagram account where you can feel free to reach out and touch base with us. But yeah, buddy, it was good chatting with you. I look forward to connecting with you next Monday, and hopefully you have a great week.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Later, homie.
See ya.